There you go.
Okay. All right. Okay. So a word about the screensaver. This is an icon that Sunita, many of you will remember her, once sent to Joe to welcome the new year. As you see, it is of dancers, airborne, carefree, hurling themselves recklessly into the future. It recalls an invitation often repeated here: come ready to dance. You know, it is so unlike me, so foreign to the way I approach the new year. Not so much recklessly dancing as timidly crouching, that you could be forgiven for thinking that it's a joke, but it's not a joke. When Joe proposed it, I agreed enthusiastically. After the teaching, perhaps it will become clearer. So, for the teaching, perhaps we can dispense with the screensaver, Joe. I have entitled this The Left Brain's Lament. Two quotations to set the stage. The first: mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. Mind is their master. And the second: who is your enemy? Mind is your enemy. No one can harm you as much as your own mind, untrained. Who is your friend? Mind is your friend. No one can help you more than your own mind, well trained. There is no mistaking these words from the Dhammapada. The Buddha said these words. But why this emphasis on the mind? I teach suffering, the Buddha famously said, and the cessation of suffering. I teach suffering and the cessation of suffering. Mind is our enemy because untrained, it is the cause of suffering. Mind is our friend because well trained, it brings cessation to suffering. Could that be true? How is it that the untrained mind is the cause of suffering? Because the untrained mind is ignorant of impermanence, ignorant of the impermanence of the self. I mean, what could be more permanent than the self? I think, therefore I am. Because we think of the self as this abiding, bounded structure, indeed, the all consuming focus of our attention, we cling to what appears to be in its interests, and we try to ward off whatever appears to threaten it. So, how is the mind, the untrained mind, to be trained? Training the mind is about learning to see through the mind's conviction of its own permanence. Once seen through, the mind wakes up from its self absorption, its obsession with its well being. Its rigid structure dissolves, its defenses melts, it opens up. To what, we might ask? In last week's poem, The Virgin Birth, Joe suggests that what we might yet open up to is integrity. Integrity. Now, that's a word that catches my attention. To a doubter like me, integrity means intellectual honesty, and it can easily feel threatened by invitations to leap recklessly into the unknown. But etymologically, integrity means wholeness. And this is the meaning Joe gives it in The Virgin Birth. Integrity as a wholeness hidden within, waiting to be born, midwifed by the universal spirit. If only we would relax, sit in silence, open our hearts, and let it happen. For all my worry about integrity as intellectual honesty, am I missing out on integrity as wholeness? And could the problem lie in my mind, in a kind of ignorance that hems me in, that keeps me from wholeness, ironically, in the name of integrity? The Buddha approached this problem not as a philosophical, but as an existential inquiry. What is the first thing to be said about our existence? It leaves much to be desired. It is unsatisfactory. It is dukkha. We suffer. That's the first noble truth. I mean, what is it that brings all of us here? What makes us gather like this? Is it not ultimately that we suffer? Listen to the news. Listen to the stories that we share here on Sunday mornings. Our loved ones get sick and die. We get sick and die. We make choices we regret. We witness tragedies and we suffer them. Our world is pockmarked with violence and mayhem. We kill one another. We make war on one another. We let children starve. Women and girls are routinely violated. We view from a safe distance the weak, the needy, the abused, the forgotten. We watch helplessly as our governments are hollowed out by corruption, as our frightened neighbors reach out to despots for security, as animal species die daily, as the planet itself is threatened. We are sad. We're anxious. We search in vain for meaning, for a way to make sense of this disappointing existence. Could a truly loving creator have designed it this way? If it were otherwise, if we lacked nothing, if we had no reason to feel anxious or lonely or desperate, would we yet gather to celebrate our blessings, to give thanks to the source of this bountiful life? The book of Genesis suggests otherwise. Genesis suggests that this was the Creator's original plan, that we would live satisfied lives in harmony with one another and with all species in a Garden of Eden, but that we couldn't be trusted with it. We wanted more. We blew it. But who could blame us? The first members of our race, no less than us, would hardly settle for passive handouts. They wouldn't settle for a life on welfare. They would want to assert some agency, to take responsibility for their lives, to make decisions, formulate goals, get to the bottom of things, distinguish truth from falsehood, subjective from objective, take charge of their own destiny. The conduct of our first parents has been given a bad rap, has been maligned as a prideful uprising against the Creator, has been called a sin, indeed, our original sin. But this is us. This is who we are. These values of creativity, of curiosity, of responsibility, of discrimination, of choice, these represent the best of us. These are what make us a little less than the angels. We're educated for this, to probe, to understand, to take charge, to develop a stable sense of identity, to become mature selves. Now, the Buddha's provocative insight was not that this crystallization of the purposeful self is problematic in itself. Mind is your friend. No one can help you more than your mind, well trained. It is thanks to our success in shaping an identity that we can do all manner of things, from catching a bus, to splitting the atom, to raising a family, to saving the planet, to investigating why it is that we suffer. In fact, for the Buddha, training the mind is all about investigating the way it works. Short of investigation, we remain naive. Our original sin is not pride, it's ignorance. Unwittingly, we take our minds with a seriousness they simply do not deserve. Our awful solemnity, Merton called it. Cast it to the winds, he advised. Casting our awful solemnity to the winds, the Buddha saw, means seeing through our habit of living in a world of separate things, things with boundaries, not least the world of separate, bounded, independent selves when in fact we are in a world of shifting boundaries, of flow, of impermanence. What is one flowing whole, we slice and dice, and we don't know what we're missing. Jill Bolte Taylor has taught us that this tendency to slice and dice, to see things as fixed, as bounded on the one hand, and as fluid, open, and malleable on the other, is a function of different parts of the brain, and that the balance of these activities differs in different people, a product of genes and upbringing. For those of us like me, strongly habituated to left brain imperialism, my first reaction to the notion of impermanence is one of unease and suspicion. I immediately anticipate a woolliness of thought, a crumbling of standards, a slide into sentimentality. And in that sense, the Buddha would instruct me, the mind is my enemy and is in need of training. Mind training is what we offer in this community. Our central practice is meditation. The state to which we aspire is mindfulness. I appreciate that our practice here is nourished by many traditions, theistic and non-theistic, Christian and non-Christian. Some traditions include a well-delineated theology and metaphysics, others not. Some are nourished by devotions and dance, others are more austere. I grew up in a Catholic tradition, rich in theology, philosophy, ritual, and devotional practice. Ours was an authoritative church, and I took a lot of comfort in that authority, in its certitudes. You know, when it came to having answers to life's ultimate questions, the Roman Catholicism of the 40s and 50s was unsurpassed. I would later come to appreciate that our tradition also included a current less beholden to creed, scholastic argument, or authoritative pronouncement, one I would come to recognize as the mystical. But its exemplars, John of the Cross, Julian of Norwich, Teresa, were a minority taste in post-Enlightenment times. As a seminarian in the pre-Vatican II Catholic Church, I didn't learn much about the mystics. Ours was a headier formation. We were mainly schooled in having cogent answers for the Protestants, unbelievers with whom we foresaw ourselves engaged in combat. In the seminary, we did have a practice of daily meditation, but it was a pretty rational exercise and moralistic, a self-critical inventory of one's behavior aimed at whipping oneself into spiritual shape. I still remember the title of a book read aloud in the refectory in those days. It was by a French Redemptorist priest named Louis Collin. It was titled Striving for Perfection. Father Colin has much to answer for. Many of you will remember that authority, both religious and secular, took a hit in the 60s, what with the Second Vatican Council and the Vietnam War. Question authority, our banners read. But we had certitudes of our own, those of us who were protesting the war and arguing for a church more relevant to our times. And we had moral righteousness in spades. The very first sign I ever carried read, "You can't kill conscience." And we like to describe what we were about, perhaps just a little vaingloriously, as transforming the world in justice. Over the years, I have grown wary of certitudes. Let the mysteries remain mysterious, I say. And I've grown suspicious of moral righteousness. Hence my taking refuge in the Buddha, who famously deflected questions about God or ultimate reality. I teach suffering and the cessation of suffering, and instead directed our attention to what's going on in our mind. If you do, he said, you will notice that things crop up one after the other, the product of sensory input and of the mind itself. And what comes up typically comes up accompanied by a certain feeling tone or Vedana as something pleasant or unpleasant. And if you're not paying close attention, you will find yourself rejecting the unpleasant to make it go away and grasping at the pleasant to make it stay. You'll find yourself stepping in subconsciously to manage things. With attention, the Buddha said, you can train your mind not to take that step. You can train your mind simply to notice what is presented without rejection or grasping, without judgment or discrimination, without interpretation, without needing to manage or control. That's a crude summary of the Buddha's central teaching, the teaching that in Buddhist circles goes by the somewhat ungainly name of dependent origination. The moment of mindfulness is the frontier between simple awareness and the rush to judgment. The interface between the managerial left brain and the receptive right brain. There is nothing wrong with our thoughts or sensations. We need them. That is the mind being our friend. It is when we slip beyond acknowledgement to aversion or clinging that the mind stops being our friend. But isn't this non-judgmental approach simply quietism? My rational mind pipes up. Isn't this just burying our head in the sand? Why do we have a brain if not to judge, to discriminate, to make comparisons, to resolve problems, to choose strategies designed to make our lives and our world a better place? But it is not the thinking that is the problem, I remind my rational self. It is the thinking that has already slipped over into aversion or clinging. It is the thinking that precludes openness to life-giving possibility, because it has already drawn upon a neural file long archived in my left brain. What is being asked of me? My rational brain insists. My fears, my grief, my anxiety, they're not ill-founded. This is the way things are. This is reality. Don't expect me to buy into a mental gymnastic that will make suffering and decline and death all go away. There are names for that. It is called denial. It is called wish fulfillment. It is called magical thinking. But we are asked in this practice to deny nothing. Call it as you see it. Acknowledge the reality you're feeling. Honor it. Comfort the part of you that needs comforting, but don't flee. Be open. Have no expectation. Seek no answer. Just be. Without a single change in the external world, we are told, reality will be changed. How come? Because mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. Mind is their master. When the mind hands over its rigid control, the result is not, as the mind had feared, chaos, but flow, possibility. You know, I noticed when I first joined this community that the convention was, when one wanted to speak of the surrendered mind, to refer to it as the heart. Some action, we are often reminded here, can only come from the heart. What is supposed to be happening when we rest in the still point of mindfulness? It is not inertia. It is a new readiness for action. No longer controlling, but compassionate. In the stillness, the heart knows what is healthy and what is wise in ways that would never occur to the rational mind. Or, as Merton reports, there is in all things an inexhaustible sweetness and purity, a silence that is a fountain of action and joy. It rises up in wordless gentleness and flows out to me from the unseen roots of all created being. And then there's the image of the dance. To forget ourselves on purpose, to cast our awful solemnity to the winds, Merton says, is to find ourselves invited to join in the general dance. Could this be so? Could it be that when we curb our knee-jerk rush to judgment, the next life-giving option presents itself? That we find ourselves partnered with the life force? That we find ourselves dancing? How does one actually get to see things this way? Does it require some sort of leap? Some sort of throwing all caution to the wind? Can a rational being take such a leap with integrity? Ah, there is that question again. Can a concern for integrity as intellectual honesty stand in the way of integrity as wholeness? Jill Taylor Bolte helps here. Integrity as intellectual honesty is a left brain concern. Integrity as wholeness, a whole brain concern. To access the whole brain, she says, is to go beyond the left brain's boundaries, to feel the heart expand, to meld into the eternal flow. Really? This is a thing? My integrity is indeed at stake, it seems. Not the left brain's parochial obsession with reason, however, but the whole brain's communion with the infinite. I see the Buddha nod in agreement. Let go of the self's delusion, I hear him say. There is nothing to be lost and everything to be gained. Really?